SEAL team lost behind enemy lines until a female analyst found them through static hissed through the Joint Intelligence Operations Center, seeping into every corner of the dimly lit room like a creeping fog. The monitors cast pale, flickering light over tired faces, illuminating expressions stretched tight with frustration and fatigue. Every second, the radio crackled with fragmented transmissions, broken calls, and incoherent bursts of interference. Operators leaned closer to their consoles, fingers flying across keyboards, eyes darting from one corrupted map to another. The air was heavy with tension. Someone muttered, almost to themselves, "It's already lost." Another whispered, "Even the senior analysts can't make sense of this." Emily Carter walked in, her presence quiet but firm. A pale, chipped mug hung from her fingers, steam long gone. Her hair was tied back with military precision, and her eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that only years of night shifts and relentless focus could carve. She didn't announce herself. She didn't need to. The room seemed to notice anyway. A junior comms tech glanced at her and let out a sharp, mocking breath. "Oh, great. The desk analyst is here." Two sergeants at the far console traded smirks, already convinced she would contribute nothing of value. They didn't know she had a reputation built on noticing what no one else saw. They didn't know that the silent, meticulous analyst they dismissed was the very reason missions succeeded when chaos struck. Emily moved past the crowd, brushing shoulders without hesitation. She set her mug down softly on a console and reached out to a dial. Her fingers touched it with the calm certainty of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The static bent under her touch, twisted and shifted into a faint, deliberate rhythm. Everyone froze. The room, previously filled with noise and panic, seemed to pause as though waiting for her next move. "Before we begin," a narrator's voice would say in a video, "remember to subscribe to military and veteran stories to follow tales of courage and heroism." But in this moment, the real story was unfolding here, unseen by the world. Emily's reputation had always been quietly debated. On paper, she was impressive. Degrees, commendations, completed courses, but in a space dominated by call signs and combat stories, paper credentials meant little. To most, she was a civilian, a desk jockey, someone who hadn't felt the sting of sand under boots or the heat of gunfire at close range. Rumors whispered about a long-ago exercise where she supposedly froze, and the story, distorted over time, labeled her unreliable. She ignored it all. She never justified herself. She never explained. She simply walked into the storm of static and chaos, letting her focus do the talking. Around her, the operators typed furiously, shouted over each other, and cursed the corrupted feeds. But Emily's eyes were fixed on a pattern hidden in the noise. She didn't need to rush. She didn't panic. She listened. Overhead lights flickered. Screens glitched. Alarms pulsed in red waves, demanding attention. Yet Emily's breathing stayed even. Her mind narrowed to the single dial in front of her, to the faint rhythm beneath the static. She adjusted it by a millimeter. The distorted signals bent, softened, and then, just for a heartbeat, a fragment of deliberate cadence emerged. Short bursts, a pause, longer sweeps. Everyone else missed it. Everyone else dismissed it, except her. Emily had trained her mind to see the invisible, to hear the signal buried beneath chaos. And now, without a word, she began the work that would uncover what no one else in the room could. The fate of a team lost behind enemy lines, reaching through the static for someone who could understand them. The room had no idea who they were witnessing, and by the time they realized, it would already be too late to underestimate her. Emily Carter sat at the heart of the chaos, calm and deliberate, but most of the room saw nothing beyond her quiet demeanor. To the outside world, she was a civilian analyst, a woman whose hands never carried a rifle, whose boots had never pressed into foreign soil, whose experience came from textbooks, datasets, and probabilities. They didn't see the depth beneath the silence, the countless hours spent turning fragments of noise into actionable intelligence. Her desk was a reflection of that meticulous mind. A small, struggling plant sat in the corner of her station, its leaves reaching upward as if echoing her own quiet persistence. A chipped mug with faded blue stars waited near her keyboard, a relic of long nights fueled by coffee and determination. Headphones, taped in 2 places, hugged her ears like a second skin. Most people would have replaced them long ago, but she knew every rattle, every nuance, every frequency they filtered. The operators and soldiers around her had formed judgments long before they understood her work. Chief Radio Operator Sam Donnelly saw her as excess, a civilian who added complication to already stressful missions. He cracked jokes loud enough for others to hear, asking if she needed silence to think, implying that the chaos of the real world was beyond her neat charts. Lieutenant Mark Reeves, the SEAL liaison, treated her more cautiously. He respected her reports, cited her assessments when convenient, but he still questioned her judgment under pressure. Neither of them understood the lessons hidden in her precision, lessons learned through years of observing, decoding, and surviving, and on signals others couldn't perceive. The nickname Librarian of Signals followed her like a shadow. It wasn't meant as praise. To the operators, her careful, exhaustive methods were a delay, a complication in a world where speed and brute force were rewarded. Yet those same methods had prevented missteps, uncovered hidden patterns, and saved lives before anyone had noticed. Every mission she touched carried a quiet order, a safety net woven into the chaos of battlefield communications. Emily's background didn't scream heroism. She had never kicked down doors or carried a team over rugged terrain. She had never stacked onto a breach with sand and smoke stinging her eyes. Her courage was invisible, encoded in numbers and waveforms, expressed through silence and observation. And yet, she had trained with naval special warfare teams, teaching advanced signal camouflage, hidden channel extraction, and improvised communication techniques. She had been the invisible hand behind the success of countless missions, though most would never know. Even now, as alarms rang and static screeched across the room, her eyes remained steady. She didn't join the chaos. She observed it. She tracked every fragment of sound, every micropattern buried in the interference, storing the details in her mind and in her worn notebook, where dozens of hand-drawn frequency maps, directional markers, and signal patterns waited to be deciphered. In quieter moments, she would stand at the window overlooking training grounds. SEAL teams moved like single organisms, hauling boats, climbing ropes, reacting without hesitation. She admired their speed and grit, but she didn't envy it. She studied it. Each movement, each communication, each subtle gesture became data she could interpret, anticipate, and translate into actionable guidance. Her quiet persistence, the very thing mocked by her peers, was a form of courage. It was endurance, precision, and mastery combined. She didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need a battlefield medal to prove her value. Emily had learned that influence came not from volume, but from insight, and the moment of truth, when Echo Team would call through the chaos, was approaching. She adjusted a dial, tracing a faint, deliberate pulse beneath layers of static. The room erupted in noise, panic, and frustration around her, but Emily's focus never wavered. Every bit of training, every long night spent decoding signals had led to this moment, and when her fingers touched the waveform, she didn't just see numbers. She saw the lives of a team still fighting for survival, hidden in the chaos, waiting for someone who could hear them. Emily Carter, the quiet civilian, the librarian, was about to prove that heroism didn't always come with gunfire and medals. Sometimes it whispered, and sometimes it came through static. The emergency alarm tore through the Joint Intelligence Operations Center, pulsing red light across walls and monitors. Operators jumped from their chairs, headsets clattering, fingers striking keyboards in frantic rhythms. Fragmented transmissions filled the room like shards of glass, gunfire crackling faintly in the distance, broken voices shouting coordinates, warnings, calls for help. Someone shouted, "It's behind enemy lines!" Another cursed under their breath. The digital map flickered erratically as GPS trackers on SEAL Team Echo failed one by one, blinking out until their entire feed dissolved into gray. Panic threaded through the room, tension tightening around the operators' throats like a vice. Emily stepped forward instinctively, drawn to the main console by more than protocol. Donnelly planted himself in front of her, jaw tight. "Step back. Specialists will handle it." But she didn't. Her gaze stayed locked on the corrupted waveforms, tracing the jagged interference for a pulse no one else could see. She opened her mouth to suggest an adjustment, but a burst of distorted shouting cut her off. Gunfire, faint but unmistakable, thumped through the static. Reeves and another lieutenant shouted overlapping commands, arguing over rescans, encrypted channels, and atmospheric interference. The room swelled with chaos, but Emily's focus narrowed. "Carter, step back," Donnelly barked. "You're just an analyst." Someone else added, "You'll slow us down." She didn't move. She raised a hand slightly, offering a subtle suggestion to adjust the gain. A corporal near her rolled his eyes, mocking her motion with a flourish of his own hand in the air. Laughter broke, harsh and impatient. Stress made people cruel. Emily's cheeks warmed, not from embarrassment, but from the weight of knowing Team Echo was still out there, struggling, relying on someone who could read the chaos they were sending. Her fingers hovered over the dial, tracing an almost invisible rhythm beneath the static. Then a transmission slipped through, half a second of sound, broken, distorted, but undeniably human. 3 wounded. Extraction impossible. And then silence. Not static, not interference. Nothing. The entire room froze. Her heartbeat matched the faint, fractured pulse she detected. Slowly, deliberately, She leaned closer. Beneath the noise, she saw structure, a rhythm embedded deliberately in the chaos. 4 short bursts, a pause, 2 long sweeps. She's grasping at nothing, someone muttered, whispering in disbelief. But Emily didn't hesitate. Her fingers danced across the console, isolating the faint hum buried under the interference. She muttered under her breath. They always embed in threes, eyes scanning the waveforms like notes on a musical staff. The surrounding analysts whispered questions. What does that mean? Only the best teams use that. Reeves leaned closer. Curiosity and concern etched across his face. He watched her work with the intensity of someone seeing a puzzle finally start to make sense. Emily pulled her battered notebook from her pocket. Pages filled with frequency maps, directional markers, and coded notations flipped open as if waiting for this exact moment. She traced the signal onto the map, drawing lines with precision. "They're moving," she whispered. Her hand followed the pulses across the digital terrain overlay, inferring movement from subtle distortions. Skeptics murmured, but her focus never wavered. Short taps, long sweeps. She read them like an open book. A faint ripple in the signal betrayed a river crossing. The pulses shifted along a canyon, revealing the improvised path of Echo Team as they navigated dangerous terrain. Reeves motioned for silence, and the room leaned in, letting her work. Donnelly's arrogance had faded, replaced by tense disbelief. Analysts stopped pacing, officers straightened. Slowly, the tide of chaos began to bend toward one quiet force in the center: Emily Carter. Every pulse she decoded, every line she drew, every subtle adjustment she made brought clarity to what had seemed impossible. The lives of Team Echo rested in the fragile rhythm of her attention, her skill, and her unshakable focus. And in that small, silent center of the storm, she became the eye, the calm precision through which survival would be orchestrated. The room held its collective breath as Emily worked. The chaos of alarms, shouting, and clattering keyboards seemed to fade, replaced by the quiet authority of her concentration. Each pulse, each distorted wave, became more than noise. It became a breadcrumb, a path leading to the hidden Echo Team. Lieutenant Reeves, who had spent the night hovering near her, watched with disbelief. He had doubted her once, assumed her civilian background and neat charts meant limited capability. But now, witnessing the way her fingers danced across the secondary console, the way her eyes traced frequencies like threads of a hidden tapestry, his skepticism faltered. Donnelly, loud and brash just minutes ago, now stood frozen. His earlier arrogance had melted into silent observation, an acknowledgement of the precision and expertise unfolding before him. The other analysts, who had mocked her meticulous notes and careful adjustments, whispered among themselves, their voices low, tentative. "Is she decoding it?" one asked. Another replied, This is advanced Surrey signaling. Only the best understand this." Emily didn't notice the change in the room. Her focus never wavered from the console. Her notebook, frayed and worn, lay open beside her, pages filled with symbols, arrows, and diagrams that most in the room could not comprehend. She isolated a subtle microfrequency, a pulse so faint it would have been dismissed by anyone not trained to see the hidden patterns in chaos. "They're crossing water," she murmured softly. The ripple in the signal betrayed the passage over a river, a small but critical clue that narrowed the team's location. Reeves leaned in closer. "How can you tell?" he asked. Emily didn't answer immediately. She only adjusted a dial, fine-tuning the reception, isolating the faint echoes. "Water bends frequencies this way. See the distortion? They must be across the river," she explained calmly. Eyes turned from the screen to Emily, then back to the map, and a wave of realization swept through the room. The signals weren't random. They were structured, intentional, deliberate. Every operator, every analyst, every officer suddenly understood they were witnessing skill that transcended training alone. The doors to the JIOC slammed open. Commander Ryan Hale strode in, dust clinging to his uniform, sweat darkening his collar. His eyes swept the room, scanning the chaos until they landed on Emily. He froze. She was bent over the secondary console, headphones tilted, fingers flying across dials, tracing signals only she could decipher. Her notebook lay open beside her, the diagrams now glowing with new meaning. "Hale," Reeves said quietly, stepping aside to let the commander see the work. The room was tense, every operator watching the moment unfold. Hale's gaze didn't leave Emily. His sharp eyes, trained to recognize talent, scanned her every motion. "Carter," he whispered. Emily stiffened but didn't look up. She stayed locked on the signal, hands steady, breathing controlled. "You walked away after," Hale said softly, the unspoken weight of history heavy in his voice. The room's chatter evaporated. Analysts stopped typing. Officers froze. Even Donnelly held his breath, face pale. Every eye was on Emily Carter, the civilian they had underestimated for years. Hale's words cut through the room like clarity in fog. Emily Carter wasn't always behind a desk. She served as a civilian augmentation specialist embedded with our elite SEAL instructors. She trained teams in signal camouflage, hidden communications, and extraction markers. Half our teams made it home because of her techniques. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Analysts leaned closer, eyes tracing her notebook again. Operators glanced at her with new understanding, silent respect replacing prior doubt. Emily didn't react. She didn't smile. She didn't seek recognition. Her hands returned to the console, guiding the fragile signal, ensuring the team still fighting on the other end had every chance to survive. Donnelly's shoulders slumped, Reeves's expression softened with awe, and Hale's eyes held something almost protective, a quiet acknowledgement of the skill, courage, and dedication that had saved lives tonight. The storm of chaos had given way to recognition, not loud, not ceremonious, but profound. Emily Carter, the quiet analyst, the librarian of signals, had proven that heroism isn't always visible. Sometimes it whispers through static, unseen yet life-saving. The first flicker of confirmation came through the console, a subtle, fractured pulse from Echo Team, faint but unmistakable. Emily's fingers hovered over the dials, adjusting with careful precision. She traced the rhythm of their modified beacon across the canyon walls and river crossing, translating every pulse into movement. Every operator in the room leaned closer, silent now, watching her orchestrate the recovery without a word of hesitation. "Coordinates confirmed," she murmured, her voice calm, measured. Reeves relayed her notes to the extraction teams already moving into position. Donnelly stayed silent, head bowed, as if afraid to witness the consequences of his earlier doubt. The others, previously mocking, had fallen into quiet awe, standing back as Emily guided the fragile link between the command center and the lost SEAL team. Hale remained just behind her, a presence that was both commanding and protective. He didn't interfere. He only observed, recognizing that this was her moment, her skill, her responsibility. Emily adjusted the final frequency, isolating the subtle distortion that indicated the team's position behind a ridgeline. Short, deliberate bursts of coded transmission confirmed their movement. Low ammo, 3 wounded, navigating rough terrain. Every detail mattered, and Emily processed them all with meticulous focus. "Echo Team," she spoke into the headset, voice steady but soft. "This is Sentinel. Confirm Cipher Delta." The room held its collective breath. Static crackled, sputtered, then thinned like fog lifting from cold ground. And then came the broken, ragged response. "Carter, we knew you'd find us." A wave of relief rippled through the JIOC. It wasn't celebration, not yet. It was disbelief and gratitude coiled together in fragile tension. Reeves slid Emily's chair closer to the console, his hands gentle as he adjusted her headset for comfort. Donnelly looked away, shame and awe battling across his expression. Emily didn't speak. She only listened, filtering each breath, each signal, every fragment of communication from the team. The extraction routes she had mapped out guided the SEALs along the safest path, each marker precise, calculated, life-saving. Hale's voice broke the quiet, low and controlled. "You walked away from this world, Carter. Yet here you are, saving lives again." His gaze held both respect and unspoken history. Emily's hands paused over the console, but she didn't look up. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, her focus returning to the signals before her. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she guided Echo Team through the final leg of their escape. Each faint pulse she isolated became a lifeline. Every distortion she decoded a protective barrier against unseen threats. The team's coordinates flickered, then stabilized, then pulsed steadily, alive, moving, safe. Finally, confirmation came. Visual contact verified. Echo Team emerged battered but intact, standing together as extraction helicopters descended. Emily allowed herself the tiniest exhale, fingers relaxing just enough for the tremor of exhaustion to surface. She didn't celebrate. She didn't cheer. She simply set the headset down and closed her notebook, worn pages folding. Shut like the final chapter of a mission completed. The room behind her finally exhaled. Operators leaned back, shoulders dropping. Analysts rubbed their eyes. Officers straightened, shoulders loosening. The storm of chaos that had gripped the JIOC dissipated, leaving a quiet, reverent respect in its wake. Reeves handed her a bottle of water, voice low, genuine. "You did good, Emily. Really good." She accepted it with a small nod, unable to trust her voice yet. Donnelly approached slowly, posturing carefully, and offered a muted acknowledgement. No words of apology, but his silence conveyed the understanding he couldn't yet express. Hale placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You brought them home," he said quietly. Not loud, not triumphant, just truth. Emily met his gaze briefly, then returned her attention to the console, as if the weight of responsibility hadn't ended with the extraction. Outside the Jayok, dawn crept over the horizon. Pale light brushed Emily's tired face as she stepped into the quiet morning. Her notebook tucked safely in her pocket, her arms hugged close to her chest, she whispered to herself, "Worth it." Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through static, unseen, uncelebrated, and sometimes it saves lives without anyone ever knowing. The Jayok was quiet now. The alarms had faded. The screens displayed stable signals, maps cleared of frantic red markers, and the soft hum of powered-down consoles filled the room like a gentle exhale. Operators and analysts moved slowly, rubbing tired eyes, stretching stiff limbs, returning from the edge of panic to the mundane rhythm of routine. Emily sat at her console for a moment longer, notebook closed and tucked safely in her pocket. Her hands trembled faintly, the lingering pulse of adrenaline gradually yielding to fatigue. She didn't smile, didn't seek recognition. She never had. This was not about glory, applause, or validation. It was about the team still breathing, still alive because she had listened where others had only heard noise. Reeves approached quietly, sliding a chair next to her. He handed her a fresh cup of coffee, steam rising, its warmth almost comforting in the lingering chill of the operations floor. "You were incredible tonight," he said softly, voice low enough to keep the moment between them. "I don't think anyone else could have caught that signal." Emily nodded, eyes still scanning the now silent console. "It was there," she murmured, "all along, just needed someone to see it." Donnelly lingered a few steps behind, posture rigid but subdued. His earlier arrogance had dissolved into a quiet acknowledgement he didn't yet know how to voice. The room, which had moments ago been full of tension, disbelief, and panic, now carried a heavy respect, almost tangible, in the air. Commander Hale remained standing, just behind Emily, watching the analysts and operators return to their stations. His gaze occasionally flicked back to her, assessing, measuring, remembering. He knew, more than anyone in the room, that her skill had been honed through years of unseen effort, through risks and routines that no one would ever write in commendations. "Carter," he said finally, voice calm but firm, "you walked away from the field once. Why come back?" Emily's fingers tapped lightly against the notebook, tracing the worn edges. She didn't answer immediately. The question wasn't new to her. She had left the world of embedded operations years ago, choosing a life behind the desk, safe from the storms she had once known. But the moment a team's lives hung on signals hidden in chaos, she knew she couldn't stay on the sidelines. "Because someone had to," she said quietly. "And I could." The operators, once mocking, now regarded her with a newfound awareness. Jokes that had lingered for years dissolved in the wake of what they had just witnessed. The librarian of signals was no longer a punchline. She was the reason lives had been saved tonight. Reeves stood, offering a rare smile. "Next time, maybe they'll think twice before underestimating you," he said. Emily's lips twitched briefly, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging the humor in that understatement. Hale moved to the console, reviewing the final waveforms. "Half of our teams owe their lives to people like you, Carter," he said, voice softening. "Those who fight in the shadows, who listen when others can't, who turn chaos into clarity. Tonight, you reminded us all what that courage looks like." Emily leaned back slightly, shoulders relaxing for the first time since the alarms had sounded. The weight of the night, of every pulse and coded whisper she had followed, began to lift, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that no one would see but her. She glanced toward the window, where the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon. Pale gold brushed the floor, touching her face with warmth and calm. Courage, she knew, wasn't measured in volume or rank. It wasn't about medals or stories told. It was the quiet persistence that held a team together, that read signals no one else could, that whispered life back into the lost. Today, it had been her hands, her mind, her heart. The operations floor hummed with returning energy. But Emily didn't rush. She gathered her notebook, checked her headset one last time, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Outside, the day was beginning. Inside, respect, quiet and unwavering, had finally caught up with her. She walked toward the exit, footsteps light, notebook tucked close, knowing that while her work was invisible to most, the lives she saved would carry the echoes of her skill long after the static faded. And somewhere, out there beyond the mountains, the canyon, and the river, Echo Team lived to see another sunrise, because she had listened when no one else could.